Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Yesterday, October 15th, was the Wave of Light. For the fourth year in a row, I read the names of your babies that you submitted. This year, I had a little over 1,400 names. The full video is available on the Journey for Jasmine YouTube channel. Today, I am talking with Emma. In this episode, she discusses her experience going through an early loss with her first pregnancy. She also talks about trying to get pregnant again after loss, along with the traumatic birth surrounding her rainbow daughter. Hello, everyone. Today, I am here with Emma. Emma, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. My name's Emma. I'm 21. I have a daughter. She just turned 15 months old. And I'm just a stay-at-home mom and wife. I do like photography and stuff on the side. But yeah, that's been my dream my entire life is to be a mother and a homemaker and to stay home. So I'm really thankful that I have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, 15 months, that's a fun age, isn't it? You're
Yes.
starting to learn so much and
Oh yeah, she's
starting.
very talkative, picking up on everything.
I have my daughter, she's 19 months, so she's a little bit
Yeah.
older, but yeah, she's but now she's in the getting into everything phase.
Yeah.
So do you mind talking a little bit about your loss journey?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I always wanted to be a wife and a mother. Like that was really there were things that I thought about doing like for work and things like that. But anytime anybody asked, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? It was just, I want to be a wife and a mom and stay home and raise my babies. And so I got married at 18 and we had planned for like waiting a few years and then we'd have kids, but we got really excited and ended up trying like a year into marriage. I don't even think it was like right before our first anniversary, we found out that we were pregnant. And it was like the first time we tried. So I was like super excited and all of that. But we were also really shocked and told our families. Like it was we were not like hesitant with any of it. Like we were like, let's just go and tell everybody and it's exciting. And I just couldn't wait. Like this was literally everything I'd waited my whole life for. Was like, oh, I'm gonna become a mother. And it was just a few days later. I don't know if it's classified as a chemical pregnancy, but basically where I mean the lines on the test disappeared before I even made it to my first doctor's appointment. But yeah, I had woken up just one morning, a few days after finding out, and went to the restroom and realized that I was bleeding. And I mean, immediately I was like, this cannot be good. And I had a lot of people in my life who were really reassuring and tried to be like, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. And it was really sweet to see a lot of people rally around me because it was kind of a few days of not knowing. But when it came down to it, yeah, we had ended up losing that pregnancy and that baby. And it was really devastating because I'd always been healthy. I'd always been, basically I was just blindsided. I told myself, like, I'm all these things. I'm healthy and I'm, whatever. And so there's no reason that this should be happening. And immediately, you know, I just started imagining what's wrong with me? Something's wrong with me and all these things. And it was just a really, really hard loss. Like I was like, we have to try again right now. Like just was really like, I don't know. Like I took it so hard. It was extremely difficult. And it took a while. I mean, a few months before I got pregnant with my next baby, that I really did not let go and trust God with really anything of it. I tried to micromanage, and a lot of it I found myself that season of life. Like I didn't live in that moment. Not that you shouldn't process that loss and things like that, but I found myself struggling to even enjoy anything that I was doing because I felt like, well, I should be this far along or I should have this and this is where I should be. And it was really painful and really hard, especially because I struggled to feel like there was any way to commemorate that loss because I was so early on that I mean I had pregnancy tests and I had like the little things that we'd already ordered, but there was nothing really physical to hold on to there, which was really difficult.
Yeah, that's what makes it hard about. I've also had an early loss like that. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's almost like they didn't exist because you don't have that ultrasound picture or that, so to you they exist, but like to other people there's like not really that tangible thing that you can show people like this is my baby.
Yeah, well, and even sometimes hearing that of just like, well, it was early, and I was like, it doesn't matter. Like to me, this was important. And I think that was something I struggled with, was like, if I had just been this far along, then you know, I could commemorate in this way, but really finding ways to commemorate that baby and to honor that life and, with what we had.
So did you get a lot of those insensitive comments?
Not a ton, no. I think a lot of people were really sensitive to it and aware, but I think still, I mean, people don't know, I think, sometimes how to really comfort in that situation, and that's also, until I had gone through that, that's really not something that even I walked through or understood, empathy wise. And so I was able to have grace, but also like it was, I didn't even understand how difficult it is for people to understand until they walk through it. Like it really puts you in a club that I don't want to be in. I don't want anybody else to be in. Like I hate being a part of it, but I also am like, you so many people came out of the woodwork and were just like, I've been through this. I've been through this. And how many people don't talk about it, Like it was crazy to the amount of people who had walked through it and I had no idea.
That's what makes me sad too, is like nobody talks about it. And I mean, yeah, people are starting to talk about it more, but like all these people that are just around you that have had it, and it's like, you could have talked to me, but
Um,
they don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, or, it's just not,
mhm.
I guess it's just more of a private thing.
Sure. And I don't know why. I don't know if it is harder because there's less, oh, they haven't been here as long, so it's harder to, you know, they haven't left as much of a footprint almost. I mean, physically maybe, but yeah, like it almost is like societal even. Like I had a friend who had an early loss not long after, and it was very, I was like, okay, well, I know how to be here and I know how to talk to them about it if they want that. But it was very like, "Oh, we're moving on." And I was like, no, like you should feel like you're able to grieve, no matter what the stage is.
Yeah, that's a hard thing about early losses. And, I think also too with you're young when it happened, and I think a lot of people think, oh, it only happens with like older people, or but it can happen at any age. And so,
Yeah.
I know I'm not sure if you got these kind of comments about, oh, well, you're just young, you can
Yeah.
try again. And
Yeah, a couple of those. Yeah. And I think it was hard because that was, we talked to people about it openly, but it wasn't something that we like came, out on social media or something to where like everybody in our life knew. And so there was a lot of, we were young. And so not a lot of people knew. And we were around that age where people started to be like, so like, when are you going to have a baby? Like, are you going to try? And it was like, if only you knew like the amount of people who asked us, and it was like, we we are trying, like this is just as hard for us, like it's, and it was just struggling like with that and giving people grace in that area.
I know people mean well, like when they ask those
Yeah.
questions, but it's just like, stop asking those questions,
Yeah.
please. I know you're just trying to be nice, but like, not everybody wants to talk about their fertility
Mhm.
journey here.
Yeah. 100%. And that's like you said, like you do imagine, oh, it's just with people who are older and there's probably a reason. And so it was hard for me. I lost a lot of trust in my body and I felt like, this shouldn't have happened. This let me down. Like it gave me a lot of anxiety of just like, what did I do? Or how can I change this? And ultimately that's, I had a lot of people tell me like, this is, you didn't do anything. This happens, and that was, it was a relief, but it was also frustrating because I was like, I didn't get to, I don't know how to change this.
That does make it hard too, because I know we all, even though it's not our fault, I know we all tend to like blame ourselves, like,
Yeah.
surely I did something, like, why else would this have happened? It's
Yeah.
hard to accept, I guess, that it just randomly happens to us and we don't always know why.
Mhm. When it put a lot of fear for, you know, a lot of things that I enjoy doing, for the next baby, like I didn't want to do some of the things that I had done, leading up to the loss of that first baby because I felt like, well, what if that played into it? What if me starting this workout played into it? Like just
Mm.
anything that it made me so like on edge about everything.
So how did you know you were ready to try again? Did you try again like quickly after, or did you wait a little bit?
We did actually. I was ready. Like I really was just like, I don't know. Like, and I think I was, part of me was encouraged because I was like, okay, well, we got pregnant on the first try. Like maybe it is just, something just happened. And I think it was hard because I was ready to try again, but looking back, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to like basically now every month that I wasn't pregnant, I was re-grieving that loss, because I never gave myself space to grieve and to just take time and process all of it. And so I really processed a lot of it through that time period of trying for another baby, and even through early, in that next pregnancy. It took us about 9 months with the next one. And so that was hard for me too, because I was like, oh man, like it was so easy the first time. What am I doing wrong this time? And I truly think it was probably a lot of pressure that I was putting on my body. I mean, a lot of people will tell you that, oh, you just got to relax. And I don't think that's how it was, but because we did hear a lot of that, like, oh, when you relax, it'll happen. And I was like, that doesn't work that way for me. But
You're stressing me out more, in fact, by telling me to relax.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Well,
know. I was the same way though, like after our loss, like I wanted to be pregnant so bad again that like that's all I could focus on. It's
yeah,
like the getting pregnant again part. So then it was hard to, like you said, I kind of pushed the grief aside. Like, I don't want to deal with this right now. Let's just focus on like this.
yeah. Well, and it's so important, and that is a very, substantial part of your life. And so, not that it should be pushed aside, but also, I can remember, I think it was later on, like a few months later, I had just been talking to my mom about it, and she told me, like, you have every right to feel this, like, you should feel and you should process, you shouldn't push your emotions down, but also, you are letting this consume your life, and you're not enjoying anything in life. And it made, like, she was like, you're going to look back on this season and you're going to miss certain things because there were certain things that you chose not to participate in. And that encouraged me to lean into my community and lean into the people around me during that time.
Did you find pregnancy after loss hard? Like, were you like calm during it, or was it more like anxiety, or like how was that for
It
you?
was I was really anxious. I've always I've always been a little bit anxious in general, and so
Me
that's
too.
something I kind of just give to God. But I definitely, because I also, the second time around, I tested before I was supposed to start my cycle, and so I, like, was then just waiting. Like, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna start. Like, something's, you just kind of almost have this impending doom. And so for like days, I was like testing and watching the line get darker, and I did have, oh, what's it called, a subchorionic hematoma, which was like a little bit of bleeding early on in my first trimester. And so that was really scary, because I literally found myself flashing back and just being like, why? Like, what am I doing? And it ended up healing itself, which was, praise God, but it was still like just nerve wracking, because then I was like, am I just fragile? Like, I don't know. So I was very anxious for a lot of it. And I had I ended up having a very traumatic birth with my daughter anyway. But so there was a lot that I just felt like it was like the enemy had like a was trying to, take from me. Like, I've always wanted this. I've always wanted to be a wife and a mother. And it was like it was trying to have that foot in the door of, loss and anxiety and trauma and all these things that could have played such a role in my mental health had I not, known where to go for that.
So you said you had a traumatic birth. Is that something you want to share a little bit about, or?
Yeah, it was a lot of very, like, I don't know how much story we have time for anything like that, but it was just a lot of intervention and a lot of things that, basically, looking back, the doctors told us, like, all of these things were like one in a million, and they all kind of just happened. I had, like, my water broke, and so I went in, and I wasn't planning on being induced, but I ended up just taking the induction because we didn't know how long my water had been broken for. And so by that point, I'm like trying to ride out these contractions while also on Pitocin. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get an epidural, even though I didn't want to get that either. So I get that. And it was a really weird, like, it was very uncomfortable. It wasn't like, oh, you just get it and it's fine. But like the whole time I was like, I don't think this is working. And so come around time to give birth, like the next day, I was fully feeling everything. And I didn't realize it then. I think I was so out of it that I didn't even realize I could feel everything, but was definitely feeling contractions. It was more than just the urge to push. And so they get me ready to push, and I go to start pushing, and they realize that the cord is trying to come out first. And so I had a cord prolapse, but it was at a 10 and pushing. And they said, it's been 20 years and we've never seen something like this. And so they immediately are like wheeling me back to emergency C-section and all of that, but they didn't realize that my epidural wasn't working. And so they just cut in and I just felt it. And so they had to, like, knock me out. And all of these things that I didn't want, all of these interventions ended up happening, and just crazy. But yeah, so she ended up being fine. I had some issues, just like I hemorrhaged because they put the catheter in the wrong spot. So they ended up stitching into my bladder, like all of these crazy, just random freak events, but healed from that. And 2 weeks later, I'm like nursing her in the middle of the night, and I just have this gush of blood. And it turns out like I'm hemorrhaging then because I had retained a bunch of placenta. And so, like, just constant, like, it just felt like this process. I was like, I just would like to start my motherhood journey, and everything's trying to get in the way. So there was a lot of questioning on the front end. Not that I could go back and change anything, but just like, what is my purpose in this? Like, what does God have for me here? Because I feel so like everything keeps telling me this is wrong.
Yeah, it's really hard too, like, when you have all of these, like, oh, when they say, "Oh, these are things we've never seen," or, and I'm like, "But why am I getting, like, literally all of them?" Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Because it was hard for me like to process that, because I was like, okay, you know, I had this early loss, this miscarriage, and I thought, okay, well, that's going to be the hardest part for me. And then, like, processing, taking a while to get pregnant, that's going to be the hardest part. And all these things that I thought were going to be the hardest part, and it really was just all adding up.
Yeah. Well, did you find that there were supportive people there, like, to help you through all of that, like, medical-wise? Like, did you feel your team was supportive or
I think it was a mixture. I think that the nurses, I really loved the nurses. They really cared. They really, even came back to check on me the next day. Like, were really supportive in that process. It's hard to say. I think that with the doctors, I don't know that I don't know if it was just because it was scary or if it was the headspace that they were in, but there was a lot of like, I'm sitting here wide awake, like screaming. I'm like, please just help my daughter be okay. Like, please just get her out. And they like look over the curtain and they're like, stop saying that. And I was like, I don't know what else am I supposed to say right now? So there was, and they came back later and apologized and were like, I'm sorry. Like, it was heat of the moment. And I was like, yeah, it was heat of the moment for everybody. But
you're
so
like,
there
"I was
was,
panicking too,
yeah,
okay?"
like, this is my experience too. So it was a mixture. I want to have grace for all of them, because I don't know. Like, I know, like, even the doctor who had operated on me, like, he had watched his wife go through a cord prolapse. So it was probably just, and it wasn't like he could have stopped him and like, hey, this is something triggering for me. Let's get another doctor. It was like, we have to go in right now. So he was just
Right.
having to feel that pressure. And so I imagine everybody was just in a bad headspace.
I think that's great though that they at least came back and, like, apologized, like,
Yeah.
that's not all doctors would do that. They just kinda,
100%. Yeah.
"Well, it is what it is, and let's move on?"
Yeah, exactly.
So was there anything that helped you specifically, like, with your grief after going through loss or, going through the traumatic birth, not getting the birth that you wanted?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, with all of it, my faith played such a big role. It I feel like I'm a very, I don't know if the word is type A, but I'm a very dependent on myself kind of person, and so I do take a lot of, like, responsibility for anything that happens in my life. I'm like, "Oh, this must have been me. This must be something I'm doing wrong." And I found myself doing that with so many things, from the loss to my birth with my daughter, and so I there were a lot of things, even health-wise, that I started trying to get on track. And I don't know, I feel like I had to lean into my faith a lot, because I found myself getting very, I would run into this cycle of like, I'm, trying to rely on myself. I'm trying to fix things by myself. And maybe this is not the timing that God has for me. And the timing that our daughter, was born in was really, it was a very good, spot in our life. And I am grateful for that. Not that it would have been different with our first. Like, I would much be happier with they if they were here too. Like, I don't by any means wish I could, you know, it's a hard dynamic, because there's like, oh, well, if I had had that baby, I wouldn't have my daughter, and struggling with that. But I don't know, I'm getting a little off track here. Yeah, but a lot of it was my faith, and people around me who had walked through those things and who were able to talk with me through those things, and really just trusting in God for whether it wasn't always a matter of going to him and being like, "Hey, I want a baby. I want a baby." Like, just instead of just finding myself asking and asking, a lot of it was just processing my feelings and grieving, and being okay with just sitting in that feeling instead of trying to stuff it. And I think that that's made me a very outward processor, you know, which was helpful for when I was going through my postpartum journey. I kind of just word vomited everything I felt, but like, I think that it made me, being able to talk to my parents. My parents are really supportive. I mean, my spouse is too. My husband is great, but also, like, I felt like a child in that moment of like, "Mom, I don't know what to do. I'm scared." Like, and so being able to go to her and just glean from her wisdom was also really a blessing, because she would hear me, she would let me just cry or process or feel whatever I need to feel. And it was never invalidating, but then there would also be times that it was like, you have every right to feel that way. And also, here are some practical steps that you can take as well.
Sometimes, it doesn't matter how old we get. We just need our mom sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, yeah, she's still like, I mean, we're seeing them multiple times a week. Like, I always want to be around my parents.
Do you plan to share with your daughter about her sibling?
Yeah, yeah, that's something I've always loved, being open about our loss in the first place, because that was our baby and that was important. And I didn't want to take, oh, from the time that I knew of them before I lost them, like that was not their only life. I mean, in the sense of, we weren't able to give them a name or anything, but like we can still honor them. There's still a way to, celebrate that that was a life that we were given. And so, even just with other people talking about it. But yeah, I do plan to talk with her. And we even have a book. Actually, I was at like a farmer's market a few weeks ago, and they were giving away these books. And it was something along the lines of like, Mommy Lost a Baby. And it had the name Emma in it, which is my name. So I thought it was kind of crazy. I was like, this is like meant to be that it was a perfect for like guiding them through, here's what that loss looks like, for something that's hard for you to understand. But yeah, I've always wanted that to be something we talk about, with our kids eventually, because that matter, it's a baby that matters just as much to us.
Do you do anything special like on the due date or the anything like that? Or did you not really know like when the due date would have been?
Yeah, we hadn't had a doctor's appointment. So, I mean, I had like in my like tracking app where I kind of knew, but we found out we were pregnant on January 3rd, which was actually my sister's birthday. But we found out we were pregnant January 3rd. So on that day, we would like release balloons and things like that. We would just do like a pink and a blue one. And that was, I, for so long, like it was almost an everyday, every day I was crying and processing and grieving. And then I got to where it was like once a week and once a month. And, like I'd always think about the baby, but it wasn't as hard for me to process. But man, when we like chose to do that and to honor them on that day, like it was hard for me. I really struggled because it was just like, man, like this just kind of walking through it again.
Mm.
And then whenever we had first started trying, my husband had got me a little notebook that was like letters for our future kids. And so as I was pregnant, I could kind of document that journey. And so whenever I found out I was pregnant with the first baby, I had started writing in it. I mean, I didn't have too many pages because it was very early on, but I would just kind of write in it as I thought about it. And then that was also something that, as I learned to let go, like I wrote like kind of like a closing that chapter for their notes, because I'll write for each of my babies in there. But that was something that I processed and honored them with as well, was just kind of like, it's kind of like my last goodbye to you. And so that was really, it was difficult, but I'm also really thankful that I've got it to look back on, and, you know, to still once again have something tangible.
Mm. Yeah, I have a hard time too on like the actual on Jasmine's birthday. Like whenever we do
Yeah.
anything like in honor of our babies, like that just it's like we're giving ourselves the space and the permission that day to like let it all out. So then
Yeah.
yeah, it comes it comes flooding out.
Mhm. That's very true. And it's like I'm very for like, if you feel something, feel it and get it out. But I'm also like, man, if I really were to sit every day and think about this, I would be a mess like all
Yeah.
the time. And so yeah, it is like you kind of have that release of like, man, and there are little triggers sometimes that will,
Mm.
cause me to get emotional in random times, but especially on those like those upcoming times and when you see those memories in your phone and things like that.
Yeah, it's way too exhausting to like think about it and be sad every day.
Mhm.
I was like,
Yeah.
I can't do this the rest of my life. Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, like we have to just I mean, the grief never goes away, but we just learn to live with it and, not have every moment be like horrible.
hmm
So do you find that your loss affects you in any way like when you're parenting after loss?
I haven't found it too much, no. I think there's times, because we never really knew that baby, on Earth side. We never really had like, it's very easy for me to be like, this is my first baby. Even when talking to people about my daughter, like I'm like, oh, she's our first. And in a way she is, but also, you know, she's the first that we've parented. And
Mhm.
so I do very like, oh yeah, first child, this is why she acts this way and things like that. But like, I don't think about it often in like, I haven't found myself treating her like to where it's difficult to not spoil her or things like that. To where like, because, she's my rainbow baby and stuff. But I do find like there's times like when I'm putting her to bed, I'm like, man, like cherish this because this is what you've wanted. Like it's exhausting and I'm waiting for her to go to sleep. But like, man, like this is what, you've waited for so long. And so be grateful for it.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit hard on ourselves too because parenting is really hard. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
whether you've been through loss or not, and we don't have to love every moment of it or think every moment is fun or easy because it's still hard, but then we get that guilt sometimes.
100%. Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely at the end of the day, I'm like, I'm ready for everyone to go to bed and I'm
Yeah.
tired.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
but that mom guilt, oh, it's the worst.
Oh, it really is. Yeah.
So do you have any advice for people who have gone through a loss?
I think the biggest things that helped me and that I would hope would help other people is that freedom to process, finding people that you're able to process it with. And even, you know, for me it was so hard for a little bit to kind of bring it up because I couldn't bring it up without getting emotional. But when I would talk to people, that's when I would have, these stories come out of like, oh, we walked through that and we went through that. And it didn't necessarily, it wasn't going to fix anything. It wasn't going to change anything, but it made me feel like I'm not alone in this, like this person understands on a level that really you can only understand if you've been there. And it's once again, it's a club that I don't wish anybody to be in, but it's, you know, I'm thankful that it has given me the empathy to understand how I can serve those people. So yeah, I think talking about it, I think I've always, yeah, I had a family member a while back who lost a baby, and the only thing I could think of, like, I was like, what's the way to serve her right now was finding her a necklace that had like the birth flower. So like when the baby would have been due, the flower of that month, because I was like, that's what I needed in that time was something tangible to hold on to. And there's a lot of things that people brought us and gave us, and I even dried the flowers from that people sent us whenever they figured out we'd had a miscarriage. And those tangible things, being able to have those and hold on and honor that baby, um, really helped me because it felt like I'm not just leaving that behind. I'm not just, getting my hopes up and then letting it go. Like I'm able to really carry it with me.
I love that you did that, that you saved the flowers and everything. I wish I
Yeah.
had thought to do that at the time. But you're right, like just anything tangible because I found, after loss, like you're expecting to bring this baby home and then like you have nothing to hold. Like
Hmm.
so I think you're right, just having something to hold on to, even if it's a small thing, if it's a big thing, just like whatever it is, like this is the thing that,
Hmm.
symbolizes my baby. I think that's
Yeah, well,
really
and
important.
also, yeah, and it's not. I mean, we've had some friends with some later losses, and so for them, being able to talk about the experience they've had and the memories from when they were pregnant and things like that, being able to talk and honor that baby and say their name if you have a name picked out and things like that really matters, to be able and to send them a text, on the anniversary of their birth date or when they lost them. Like those things matter as well. I think those are important.
Yeah, definitely. And there are things that a lot of us may not have thought about much before, like
Hmm.
going through loss. Like we might have been like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, let me know if you need anything, but like not the let's reach out to them. Like let's
Hmm.
check in with them every so often. Like I think it's made a lot of us more empathetic to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think my other biggest thing would be also, like I said, talking about it because that was a life. Like it's not just like with anybody else that you've known and anybody else that has passed, like you still talk about them and honor them when you remember them. And so just because it wasn't somebody that you knew as longer who left as big of a footprint, that you know they still had an importance and an impact on your life. And I think it's very common for us to try and just move past it, and it's hard for me. Like it's still hard for me to look, because like we had ordered a little announcement onesie and it came in the mail like right after we found out we'd lost them, and so it was really difficult to look at those things. But now, to be able to talk about it and to hold on to those things, that there's a difference between I'm not talking about this because it hurts, or I'm not talking about this because I feel like I shouldn't have to. Like I should be moved on. And there's just like you said earlier, like grief never goes away. It might just take on different forms. And so it's okay to, be processing this, and it's okay for it to hit at a time, like my husband, he was like, It doesn't hit me the same way it hits you, but I'm not ever going to be like, why are you crying about this right now? Like, this is, you know, it's just going to hit at different times, and that's okay. You just got to be able to process it then.
I know sometimes it'll hit you too, at, like, the most random times. I'm like, "Why right now?" Like,
Um,
what is even the thing that triggered this right now? I don't even know sometimes. You just, like, cry
yeah.
out of nowhere.
Hmm. Yep.
Did you find that I mean, building on that a little bit, that you and your husband in general, like, grieve differently?
I think so. I think he's always been very like inward processing, and part of it is I think that just men and women can grieve differently, but he also, I think he just never, he had grown up not really processing things, and he actually, that actually allowed him to recognize some things about himself of like, hey, like this is how I process this and I don't like that. And it was hard for him because he would beat himself up about, oh, I didn't grieve the same way, or it didn't look like this, or I didn't cry when this happened. And it's it looks different for everybody. And so I did find that, yeah, we had different ways, but it was also a really connective thing for us because I didn't expect him to grieve in any certain way. And I knew that he was hurting just as much, but to be able to encourage him, like, it doesn't have to look like this, but as long as you are processing it, that's good.
Yeah, so I think that's great though that he was able to, like, kind of recognize, like, wait a minute, like, I don't really like how this is, playing out, because I think we don't really think about, like, the way that we grieve, until we're,
Hmm.
like, in it, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute,
Yeah.
maybe I don't like this so much.
Yeah.
So did you find any particular resources that helped you after your loss?
I'm trying to think of what it's called. Is I think it's called Hope Again Collective. They have a really cool, it's just an organization. They make jewelry for lost moms and things like that, but they also have a lot of relatable stories and just captions and things like that that they would put into words the way that I was feeling, and it helped me to feel validated. So things that, whether it was social media accounts or blogs or things like that, that helped me to, first of all, feel validated and not feel alone, but also to put into words things that I couldn't really articulate. And yeah, your page as well, it connected me with a lot of people who have walked through what I've walked through. And I so appreciated how you guys honored the significance of, that baby's life and what it means to honor them. That was important to me because I feel like I said, it's easy to just move past it.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for, people to not count, like you said, because, oh, you're early or things like that. But, I've had an early loss and a late loss, and both hurt,
Yeah.
and they hurt differently, but they both hurt and they both matter. So yeah, definitely I think it's important to remember every baby.
Hmm. And even if it was, oh, we didn't know the characteristics of this baby as much, so we're not mourning necessarily what we knew about them, but that we knew of them. We're mourning, the hopes and dreams that we had. But I loved that your account also didn't pressure because we didn't have a name, like we didn't know, and I didn't really ever feel like I need to give them like this like neutral name that could just mean whatever. But I didn't feel pressured to, like, I was still able to honor that baby, and it wasn't like you have to give them a name and a reason and all of this. It was like, no, like this was just something important to you, and this
Yeah.
baby was important to you.
Yeah, I actually didn't name my two early losses either. So,
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, because we were so early too. One was a chemical pregnancy and one was a miscarriage where, we never saw the heartbeat or anything. So, again, like,
Mhm.
I don't know if they're boys or girls. I don't know anything about them, but
Mhm.
I just know they were my babies, but I still didn't name them. So,
Yeah.
it's, I don't know. Sometimes I've thought about going back and doing it, but then I'm like, I don't know. It's kind
Yeah.
of one of those things, like, I like when people do it, but I also think, I mean, it's great when you don't do it too. It's
Sure.
your
Yeah.
personal choice.
Hmm.
So is there anything else that you'd like to share or add?
Trying to think. I don't know. Ultimately, I was just thankful and excited for the opportunity to talk because I like I said, this is a club I never really wanted to be in, and it's a pain I never would have wished on anybody. I think all grief is painful, but especially, that when it's children, that's so hard, and it's the loss of a dream and the loss of what could have been. And I think maybe not advice, but just maybe advice. Like, yeah, there is hope and there is validation in that connection with other people, and don't talk more than you feel like you are comfortable with, but talking to people about it and talking about that life and honoring it, that really does allow you to connect with people who have walked through that and who know how to pray for you and be there and serve you in that season. And that means a lot to me.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Emma, for sharing your story with us. I think this is an important time to remind everyone that your baby matters, no matter how far along you were. I have heard more and more people lately who are not really liking the term chemical pregnancy because they feel it makes their baby less real. They feel the term doesn't acknowledge it as a real pregnancy or a real loss. And I can definitely understand this viewpoint. I've had a chemical pregnancy as well, and whenever I would bring it up to doctors, they would not count the loss since it was not medically confirmed. It's things like this that make you feel your loss isn't taken seriously. But know that just because it wasn't medically confirmed, or just because you have nothing tangible to, quote, prove the pregnancy, it doesn't mean your baby isn't real. It doesn't mean you don't deserve to grieve your loss. How do you feel about the term? Is it something you've ever really thought about? Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.